The storm came down the basin like it was alive. It scraped the earth, clawed at the sky, and tried to peel the skin off Will's face as he leaned low over his tired mare. He had known wind before, but this was different. This wind felt angry. It felt personal. He guided his horse along the dry creek bed, the only landmark he trusted when the world turned to a brown blur. He kept one hand on the reins and one hand tight against the mare's neck, trying to steady her breaths. Then the horse stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Her hooves dug into the dirt, and she snorted hard through the dust. "What is it, girl?" Will murmured, though the wind swallowed his words. A shape appeared through the grit. At first, it looked like a rock. Then a shed. Then something worse. Something broken. A wagon, or what was left of one. Will slid off his horse and kept one hand on her bridle as he walked closer. The wagon was on its side, half buried by the storm. One wheel was shattered. The canvas top was ripped to ribbons, snapping in the wind like dying birds. He moved around the wreckage, scanning the ground for footprints or bodies, but everything was disappearing fast under the blowing dust. Then he heard it. A small cough. Will rushed to the torn flap and ripped it back with his shoulder. Inside, 3 figures huddled in the shadows. The first was a woman holding a broken rifle, like she meant to shoot him with it anyway. Her dark eyes were sharp with fear and anger. Her dress was torn, and her jaw was set tight. "Stay back," she warned. "Ma'am," Will said, hands up. "I'm not here to hurt you." Behind her, another woman was curled into herself, rocking gently, her hands pressed against her ears. Her face was pale, untouched by dirt, as if she had drifted here from another world. The third girl looked the youngest. 19, maybe. Heart-shaped face. Wide, trembling eyes. She stared at Will as if he were the first real thing she had seen in days. Will's heart dropped. "You've got to get out of here," he shouted over the storm. "This wagon won't last another hour." "Where?" the riflewoman demanded. "My cabin," Will said. "It's about a mile north. It's shelter. It's warm. You'll die if you stay here." The riflewoman hesitated. She looked at the storm. She looked at her sisters. She knew he was right. "My sister's hurt," the youngest said softly. "Her foot." "I'll carry her," Will said. He didn't ask permission. He moved inside slowly, like approaching a spooked animal. The silent one didn't react until his shadow fell over her. She flinched but didn't resist as he lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light. "Come on," he shouted. They formed a trembling chain behind him. The youngest girl held Will's coat. The riflewoman held her sister. Together they walked through the storm. Every few steps the wind nearly knocked them over. Twice the girls fell, dragging each other down. Will planted himself like a fence post until they were steady again. When the dark shape of his cabin appeared through the dust, he felt his knees go weak. Inside it was cold but safe. He set the injured sister on his bunk, and the other 2 collapsed near the hearth, shaking from fear and exhaustion. The riflewoman, Lenora, watched him with suspicion sharp enough to cut glass. "We have no money to pay you," she snapped. "I didn't ask for any," Will said, kneeling to check the injured girl's foot. "This land doesn't care who you are. It just takes. I'm helping you make things even." She didn't answer. She just folded her arms, her pride holding her upright, even as her body trembled. Will gently cleaned the silent girl's wound. She hissed once but didn't pull away. Her eyes stayed locked on his face the entire time, watchful, cautious, deep. She didn't speak, not one word. That night, the cabin filled with a thick, heavy quiet. Will took the floor near the door. The sisters took the bunk and his bedroll. But no one slept. Not really. Because the truth was slowly creeping through the cracks of the cabin walls. These 3 women weren't just lost. They weren't just scared. They weren't just victims of a wagon crash. They were running from something, and whatever was chasing them was getting closer. The storm hid their arrival. but it could not hide them forever. And Will Madson had just become the only barrier between three desperate sisters and the danger hunting them. The storm ended, but the danger did not. Will stepped outside at first light. The air was sharp and cold, the basin washed clean by wind. He walked toward the lean-to to check on his mare, but something stopped him cold. Tracks, horse tracks, fresh, clear, circling the cabin. Someone had watched them during the night. Will's jaw tightened. Whoever had chased those sisters hadn't lost them in the storm. They had only paused long enough to see where the women had gone. He kicked dirt over the clearest tracks and went inside. Lenora was already awake, standing by the stove with her arms crossed. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," Will lied. "I'm going into town for supplies. You'll be safe if you bar the door." "We don't need your protection," she snapped. But Will saw the fear in her eyes. He didn't argue. He couldn't. There was no time. He saddled his mare and rode out, his rifle across his lap, feeling every shadow like a threat. Sweetwater Crossing was quiet. Too quiet. Will went to the mercantile, bought flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, and a small bottle of medicine for Clara's swollen foot. He didn't linger. But before he left town, he walked into the saloon, only to listen. Two men had just stepped inside. Their boots thudded on the floorboards, their spurs clinking. Their voices carried across the room. "Judge Delver ain't happy," one said. "He wants those 3 girls found." Will stiffened. "They didn't die in that storm," the other man grunted. "Someone took him in, somebody fool enough to get in the judge's way." Will didn't move, didn't breathe. He already knew the answer. They meant him. He placed his beer on the bar untouched, walked outside calm as a shadow. But inside, something had snapped. He didn't ride away. He walked straight to the town's 2-story building, the office of Judge Giles Delver. Inside, Delver looked up from his ledger with cold gray eyes. "Well," he drawled, "aren't you a bold one?" Will stood firm. "Your men chased those women off the road. They shot at them, and they came to my cabin last night." Delver closed the ledger, a slow smile curling at the edges of his mouth. "You're harboring thieves," he said. "You're the criminal here." "Thieves?" Will repeated. "Stole money off my desk," Delver said. $19 from the youngest. Pretty girl. Shame she's foolish." Will didn't believe him. But then something in Delver's eyes told him the man wasn't lying. Not fully. Josephine had taken something, but she hadn't deserved what happened to them. "You stay away from my cabin," Will warned. "All of you." Delver leaned back. "You're one man. I am the law. I'll come take them when I'm ready. And if you stand in my way," his smile sharpened, "I'll bury you under that dirt out there." Will didn't respond. He walked out before the heat of his anger burned a hole in the floor. He rode back hard, faster than he ever had. When he opened the cabin door, the guilt hit him like a hammer. Lenora saw his face and froze. What happened? He told them everything. The saloon talk, the judge's threats, the truth about the stolen money. Josephine burst into tears, collapsing against the table. "I didn't mean to," she sobbed. "I just took a little. I was angry. I was scared. I didn't know he would." "It doesn't matter now," Will said gently. But it did matter. It put a rope around all their necks. Lenora's anger melted into despair. She sank onto the bench, her head in her hands. "He'll never stop. He'll come for us. All of us." Clara slammed her hand on the table, a sudden sharp sound that made them all jump. She shook her head hard. "Stay. Fight. No more running." Will understood her silent message. The sisters were done running. Later that night, as Will split wood outside, Lenora came out into the cold darkness. She stood behind him, her arms wrapped around herself. "This isn't your fight," she whispered. "I know. You could leave and live. Her voice cracked. "We don't have that choice." Will leaned against the fence post. "I'm not leaving." For the first time since he met her, Lenora's eyes softened. She stepped closer. Too close. "You're a fool," she whispered. "I know." Quote. And then, without warning, she kissed him. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't slow, it was desperate. A kiss full of fear and fire and a lifetime of being left behind. When she pulled away, her breath shook. "We can't," she whispered. "Not like this." She walked back into the cabin, leaving Will alone under the cold Wyoming stars, his heart pounding like a war drum. Inside, something else was happening. Josephine, shaken and ashamed, stared at the drawing Clara had carved, a picture of all four of them holding hands, a family. And jealousy flooded her, a sharp, ugly jealousy. She snatched the carving. "Josephine, don't!" Will started as he stepped inside, but she threw it into the fire. Clara let out a soft, broken sound. Will reached into the flames with gloved hands, pulling the half-burned wood out, but the damage was done. The small, carved faces were blackened, the edges charred. Clara walked to him slowly. She took the ruined piece of wood from his hand, pressed it against her chest, and turned her back to them. Josephine burst into tears. Lenora looked devastated. Will felt something crack inside him. Their fragile balance was breaking, and the danger outside the cabin was growing closer with every hour. The next morning was too quiet. Wyoming quiet was never peaceful. It was the kind of silence that warned a man something was coming. Will woke before the sun, his hand already on his rifle. Inside the cabin, the sisters lay close together on the bunk, their faces tired and swollen from crying. Even Josephine, the fiery one, slept curled into Lenora's side like a frightened child. Will stepped outside and scanned the land. Dust, tracks, movement far off. Judge Delver's men were coming. He went back inside. "All of you need to get up, now!" Lenora sat up immediately. Clara blinked awake. Josephine looked around, confusion turning into fear. "It's him, isn't it?" Josephine whispered. Will nodded. "You three get behind the cabin. Don't move until I say." Josephine's hands began to shake. Lenora grabbed them. "We'll be all right." But Will saw it in her eyes. She didn't believe that. Outside, the riders came fast, their silhouettes growing bigger and harder against the early light. Delver rode in front, wearing a black coat and a smile that turned Will's stomach. "Madson!" Delver shouted. "Step outside!" "I know you're in there." Will walked forward slowly, rifle at his side, not raised. "Morning, Judge," Will said. Delver dismounted, brushing dust off his coat. "You've caused me a lot of trouble for one simple thief." Josephine, hearing that word from behind the cabin wall, squeezed her eyes shut in shame. "She's not a thief," Will replied. "She's a scared girl." Delver stepped closer. "Those girls belong to me." "No," Will said. "They don't." Delver's men fanned out, hands on their guns. Lenora peeked from behind the cabin. Will gave her a hard look. She ducked back. Delver smirked. "Move out of my way." "No." Delver sighed. "Then I'll bury you." He raised his hand. Gunfire exploded. The basin cracked open with the sound of bullets. Dust flew. Will dove behind the water trough, firing back. One of Delver's men fell off his horse. Another took cover behind a tree stump. This wasn't a standoff. It was a small war. Lenora crawled around the cabin corner, dragging Clara with her. "Josephine, stay down!" Josephine didn't listen. She jumped up, grabbed Will's spare rifle, and aimed with shaking hands. "Get back!" Will shouted. "I'm done running!" she cried. She fired. The shot cracked the air. One of Delver's men dropped, but the recoil was too much. Josephine stumbled backward, falling hard onto the cold dirt. Delver snarled, "You little!" He aimed straight at Josephine. "No!" Will exploded from cover, rushing toward her. A gunshot roared. Josephine flinched, but Will didn't fall. Delver did. Lenora stood behind him, holding her sister's stolen carving, the half-burned wooden figure, with both hands wrapped around it like a club. She had struck Delver across the skull with all the strength she had. The judge collapsed face first into the dirt. His men panicked. Some fled. Some tossed their guns down. The fight went out of them without Delver shouting in their ears. Within minutes, the land was silent again. Will knelt by Josephine, trembling with leftover fear. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head and clung to him. Lenora dropped the carving. her breath shaking, and helped Clara stand. Clara touched her forehead to Will's shoulder in silent thanks. For a moment, all four of them stood together, breathing the same air, trembling from the same danger, alive because they chose each other. Later, as the sun warmed the land, they sat inside the cabin. Josephine cried quietly. Lenora cleaned Clara's foot. Will leaned against the wall, exhausted. Josephine wiped her eyes. "I caused all of this." "No," Will said softly. "He caused this. You were just trying to survive." Lenora looked at Will. "What happens now?" Will looked at the three of them. Three women who had lost everything. Three sisters who only had each other. "You stay here," he said. "All of you. As long as you want." Josephine looked up. "All three of us?" Will nodded. Then Josephine whispered the same question she had asked the night they met. "You choose all three?" Will took her hand gently. Then he took Lenora's hand. Then Clara's. He kissed each one on the forehead. Soft, slow, and full of the promise of safety. "I choose all three of you," he said. "Not as possessions, not as burdens, not as problems, but as family." Outside, the Wyoming wind moved across the land like a blessing instead of a curse. Inside the cabin, for the first time in a long time, the sisters felt something like hope. And Will Madson finally felt like he wasn't alone in the world anymore.